Hi, join me today as we make wonderful, yummy cashew pie. Hi, it's Gloria Donahue with Nana's Cookery, and you know I love to bake pies. I've made many nut pies, pecan pies and walnut pies, and they're both on Nana's Cookery, but I had never done a cashew pie before, and that's one of my husband's favorite nuts. So I thought I would try that, and we're going to do it today, and nut pies are so easy, so please join me as we make it. For this recipe, you're going to need a 9-inch unbaked pie crust, brown sugar, 6 tablespoons of melted butter, 5 eggs, 1 1/4 cups of light corn syrup, 2 teaspoons of vanilla, and 1 1/2 cups of cashew halves and pieces, roasted cashews. So we're going to start. I melted 6 tablespoons of butter. I have a 1.5 cups of packed brown sugar, and remember, you always pack brown sugar. We're going to put that in there. I have a 1.25 cups of the light corn syrup. Now, pecan pie is usually darker, and that's usually made with a darker syrup. And the walnut pie is only done with the light. This is going to be a mixture because it's the brown sugar but the light corn syrup. I rinsed out the container because sometimes you can't always get all the corn syrup out of a container. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do eggs, and you know my rule, if I ever go a year without getting a shell, then I'll break directly into the dish. But this calls for slightly beaten eggs anyway, so I'm going to do it into another bowl, but I always do each egg separately. Now, one of the viewers suggested that if I did it on the counter, they thought that made a cleaner break and less likely to get a shell. So we'll see. There's 1. This calls for 5 eggs. But the advantage, of course, of doing it separately into the little bowl is if there is a little piece of shell, you can get it out with the eggshell. Once you put it into the main ingredients, it's very hard to do that. There we go, 3. And these are large eggs. I generally use large eggs for baking. It's usually what it calls for, because there can be quite a difference in the size of an egg. And I'm going to use a whisk. A whisk is a very handy thing. And we're just going to beat those eggs slightly, and that's going to combine those whites and yolks. And we've got vanilla, so I'm going to, let me scrunch my brown sugar down in there. Start to give that a nice mix. We're really mixing all these ingredients except the nuts together. So now I'm going to add the eggs. 2 teaspoons of vanilla. Everything's better with vanilla. And we're going to mix that very nicely with a whisk. Always make sure that whatever bowl you're using is large enough to allow you to move. You don't want it to be coming up over. You want it to stay within the bowl, but you still want to be able to work with it. Now, as you can see, you've got to work this a little bit because you do not want any egg separated from that mixture. You want this mixture to be homogeneous, all the same. So it just takes a couple minutes, but you can see why the butter has to be melted, otherwise it would not blend with the other things. Now, my brown sugar, I would not do this if your brown sugar wasn't fine out of the bag. I keep mine sealed very tight, but if I find that it has lumps in it, the quick way to work with it is to put it in the microwave, damp paper towel, and that will soften it enough for one recipe. Not permanently, just for that recipe. Put it back in an airtight bag with either a slice of apple or a piece of bread, and it will keep it moist. But if this brown sugar had had lumps in it, hard lumps, stirring it with a whisk would not have taken those lumps out. And you can tell when you're measuring the sugar. It's very easy to see. Now we're going to put in the pecans. Is that silly? cashews, and these are pieces and halves, and they're just from the roasted nut area of the food store. We just want to make sure they're well covered. Now, you're not going to see me put the filling in the pie crust for this reason. Always do it close to your oven. If you've got a high runny filling, don't do it here and then walk 10 feet. That doesn't make any sense. I'm going to carry the pie shell over, and then I'm going to put the filling in. I mentioned a 9-inch pie shell. If you're a baker, you probably have your own favorite recipe, and it's a regular pie crust. But if you do not, please, before you make this pie, go to my very first video. Flaky pie crust made with canola oil. This pie crust was made in about 5 minutes, and I've heard from people all over the world that they finally feel they can make pie successfully. So if you have any interest in the pie crust recipe, please do that before you make this pie. We'll see you when it's done. This is our cashew pie fresh out of the oven. It has already started to fall a little bit, and it will continue to fall a little bit, because any cake or any cheesecake that you make that eggs are used to help make that batter are going to rise in the baking and fall a little bit. That's perfectly normal, whether it's a nut pie, a custard pie, bread pudding. So expect it to happen. It will rise, and then it will fall slightly. I thank you so much for coming to the kitchen. I really have enjoyed it.